Yeah, I'm a little bit of an EVGA fanboy, specifically my Kingpin wall with right there, which I'm really proud of. Which is why when EVGA announced, that they're not making graphics cards anymore, I felt like that shrine was necessary, because it's like, that's it. There's nothing else we could put up there. And then this arrived. Kioxia is proud to celebrate their 35th anniversary of the company's invention of NAND Flash, a technology that has changed how we work and play. The XT6 Enterprise Data Center NVMe SSDs feature Kioxia's developed controller, firmware in its own 3D flash memory by CS Flash, and feature a new set of form factors for future server and data center support with easy hot swappability. To see the complete spec sheet of all of Kioxia's developed drives and to celebrate the 35th anniversary, follow the link in the description below. Let me be clear, what is inside this box, for all intents and purposes, is not an EVGA RTX 4090, because this time around, technically, EVGA is not licensing the NVIDIA brand. Remember when we did our video with Steve and John about the pulling out of EVGA from their partnership with NVIDIA graphics? We were shown a sample. And basically, the reason why we were shown this sample by Andrew was specifically to say, hey, this is not a decision we took lightly, because they had even gone as far as creating an engineering sample of the card. Now, it's important to note that that particular card, there was only a very small handful of units made, and it was nothing more than a tooling test to get all of their machines and all of their automated, robot building stuff set up to be able to make the card based on the schematics and the samples that were provided by NVIDIA. That card was basically brainless. They didn't have any sort of supporting software or firmware or anything yet. It just was a physically built thing that would do nothing because there was no software backing it up. And I basically unabashedly said, can I please have one of those for my collection? And I expected to receive a card that doesn't work. However, what I received was the EVGA, well, let me show you. So this is the EVGA 4090 card. That never was. Now tell me if that isn't one of the sexiest looking cards already. It's clear that it was built on the foundation of the RTX 3090 Ti and 3090. But what you can see is a few subtle changes that I think make the card look absolutely fantastic. And as you see right there, it's the EVGA Next Gen Graphics. It is not a 4090. Same thing on the back. EVGA and then a sticker saying Next Gen Graphics. I'm pretty sure I know what's underneath that sticker, but I'm not gonna remove that sticker because one, I don't know if I'll be able to get it to go back because it's actually a pretty hard, it's like a hard plastic sticker. But anyway, this is essentially what we were shown. And this is what made me go, man, are 4090s chonkers. And that was obviously until this arrived. Let's just put this in perspective. The EVGA cards were always pretty big, but as you can see, but there's one thing the one card, which could have been a savior when it comes to the 12-volt power plug, one aspect of it anyway, was just like the 3090 Ti, they put it on the back. So you wouldn't have been having to bend the crap out of it to get it to clear your side panel. But alas, this was a fairy tale that was never told. It really looks and feels, and the weight of it and everything is very much similar to a 3090 Ti. In fact, it even has the exact same notches right here for the leash system. Remember how they had the E-leash, which was like basically a cable that would slide in there and hook onto the top of your case, which was designed to just support it. But that wouldn't have even been necessary. Do you know why? Because they tied the bracket in, just like I requested that they do. So it wouldn't have even mattered, because it wouldn't have even sagged. This is a when I say early engineering sample, this is the engineering sample. So it's got engineering sample nuances about it. For instance, if you look at the fins, you can see they're not perfectly straight. Some of them are kind of crooked and all that sort of stuff. That's probably because of the amount of handling that this card also had prior to us receiving it. See, when we received products from EVGA in the past to review, they were fully built, boxed, came off retail pallets for us to test. When we receive products from a lot of other brands, NVIDIA included, those are the first official retail run samples. So for instance, this is an early engineering sample, which is, like I said, to get tooling and stuff set up for the robots to be able to build the PCBs. Then when that all passes QA testing and stuff to make sure it's correct, then they do an initial pass where they'll produce a few hundred cards, at least NVIDIA specifically. I think it's like 1,000 units or something like that. I don't know how many EVGA would do, but they would then do an official retail test. Those cards don't have serial numbers most of the time. They don't have warranties or any of that. They're just like the final, like, okay, this is exactly as it will be made for the retailer. And then we receive it from EVGA or, excuse me, NVIDIA. EVGA always sent us perfect retail samples. That's why the little bent fins and stuff on here this is probably gonna be my creme de la creme of my collection, only because of the fact that this is it. It's like the end of the road. I don't know what to expect. All I know is that there's a specific Precision X1 build for this card to make it work. And I know it took a while to get it, probably because, like I said, they had to build an entire software support system for it to make it work. And all of that without the help of NVIDIA. So I'm happy to have it. Let's talk about some of the differences though that makes this the card that realistically, the hero we needed and deserved, but never got. So like I said, remember how I said that they actually used the leash? This is like realistically so unnecessary. If you look at the backplate, you can see there's only one spot to put the leash on here. So the leash would attach to the card. This would hook to the top of your case, a little barb hook on there. This would attach to the top of your case, and then you could adjust the length through this kind of a pulley right here, which you could pull it through or shorten it. I mean, it was creative. It was definitely better than having a big stilt underneath, but the problem was, depending on the quality of your case, it would like pull the metal down in the case because there's a lot of weight. The Not 4090 has two spots, one at the end and then one a little bit closer inside. So I just wanted to point that out that they did carry that over. The only other accessory that came in the box was a 4-plug adapter. I was not expecting to see this in there, and it is an NVIDIA branded one. So I did not expect this to be in there unless they sourced it somewhere else, because the 3090 Ti one was a triple plug. So this one being a 4-plug means it was specifically for 4090. And I would have assumed that based on their relationship having never come to fruition for this generation, they shouldn't have had these. I don't know how they got it, but anyway, here it is right here. Sidebar, we've now had reports of native ATX 3.0 cables that are direct pin to wire starting to burn. So, but anyway, let's look at the fans. This is Phil's favorite feature that they dropped. Phil always called this the herpes E, because he said it looks like the fan has herpes. Sorry, you know, visual, but still, not the prettiest looking fans. And you can see, look, they're nice and smooth, and they're gone right here. In fact, I even said that in our meeting. I'm like, oh, Phil will be happy that you guys get rid of the herpes, and EVGA was like, what? Also too, you notice the fans are larger on here. Even though the 4090, or the Not 4090, is a little bit larger than the 3090 Ti in terms of length, it's about the same height, you can see the fans are larger on the Not 4090, which makes the offset a little bit less obvious, whereas the middle fan on here is like way lower than the Not 4090. I'm always gonna Freudian slip that it's a 4090. Bigger fans, more fin density too. If we take a look at the fin stack, they did not just take a 3090 Ti cooler and plop it on there, it's like double the fin density. Remember, this is up to 600 watt spec. We are now gonna take you guys along for the ride for the very first slotting of the card into the PCIe slot and powering on what might have been one of the cleanest, most compact, it's a funny word to say, Not 4090 cards that never existed. Okay, now let's install in the system a couple things worth mentioning. One, the E-leash, 100% not necessary. I only have one screw holding this card in, and it's perfectly level because they tied in the bracket like you needed to. It's one of the few things I've done in 10 years that was actually very useful, was identifying why cards sagged and why the engineers apparently couldn't figure it out. Second of all, the multiple BIOS switch on here has a normal and an OC BIOS, but it has an LED that lights up on the back of the card that lights up the mode that you're in, so there's no question about it. The card that never made it out to the public has one of the coolest features. So as you can see, the plug comes out the back. I've got a nice radius bend on there. Plenty of room for this case, which is not the biggest case. A little side note, you know what really sucks about NVIDIA releasing a driver that gave everyone more performance? That's great. That's great. It means they could have probably done it all along, by the way. But it means all our regression testing has to start over again. Because if everyone's 30 series card is seeing up to a 20% performance uplift by driver overhead, it means when we're comparing it to the newest gen stuff, the performance is narrower, difference is narrower than it was before. So that means all of the hours and days and potentially weeks of testing that we've been doing because of all the regression testing preparing for all these new launches means we have to start all over. Want to point out, look, power slider locked at 100. He did tell me like, yeah, it's unfortunate that, remember how I said they had to write the VBIOS for this and make it work? They never got around to being able to apparently, I guess, because it's not just able to say, hey, max power limit at blah, blah, blah. This one specifically requires those sense pins, remember? So there's an extra module in there that those sense pins are basically saying, hey, there's ground here, which means we have this many plugs plugged in, which means we can go to this wattage. Doesn't exist on this card because that module is probably sort of just disabled in the sense of just saying 100% and that's it. Probably this is like a bare bones VBIOS to get it running. All the ICX sensors are here, as you can see. And this is one of the things that I would have loved to have seen this card make it because of the fact that ICX was one of the coolest things. Now, EVGA patented ICX. So you don't see this in other cards necessarily in like the UIs and stuff like this because of the fact that it's an EVGA patent. I am set to the OC BIOS because what other BIOS would I absolutely be set to? Boost lock. This is one of the cool functions because this will work with any NVIDIA card, and one of the reasons why Precision X is a great software to run if you're running any NVIDIA graphics card, because of the fact that you can hit boost lock, which will make the P state automatically go to P1, which is the fastest clock state, regardless of loads and such. So that really comes in handy where unless you really start hitting voltage and or power limits on your card, you get a little bit of a better score in your benchmarks because of the fact that it forces the clock up rather than just waiting for a load and then reacting to load. Oh, and I need to max the voltage slider too, which apparently is locked as well. Okay, you can't move the slider, but you can type it in. There's 1100. That's what we wanted. Weird. So it's at 75C right now with the fan curve pretty much untouched. I'm just gonna max it out. Look at this pulling it down under load. It's noisy. Look at this. Under load, we're pulling the temps down quickly too. It's 63 already. Dude, that cooler just was like, come at me, bro. This is following a very similar curve on the boost and stuff to the Founders. I have a feeling this VBIOS might be like off the Founders. There's artifacting. Look at that. So the core is already starting to artifact. Those artifacts are fairly certain that they're core artifacts because the memory is not even messed with right here. So I'm gonna go back to like 265 and I'm gonna start playing with the memory now. If I can go 1550, we'll pass Founders. And we just passed Founders. And yes, I know it's ECC memory, but I can always tell when it's correcting based on certain things that are happening on the screen. 1700. Memory temperature hasn't changed at all by pushing these clocks. That means the cooler that's touching the die of the GPU is obviously making very good contact with the memory. I wish I had access to that power limit. If there was any card, I almost feel tempted to volt mod, it's this one. 2000? There they go. Okay, 1950, come back. There, look at that. See, the artifacts are gone. That's insane. I said, do you know how frustrating it is to have two cards, the MSI Supreme and now the not 4090 from EVGA have memory that go to the fricking moon, but are both limited on power? Why? This is one of the things I love about Boost Lock is if you hit this button, look, I've talked a million times about overclocking. The problem is depending on the load conditions, sometimes it can overshoot where your setting is because there might be a limiting factor keeping it from a few boost bins down from where you're actually targeting. So hitting Boost Lock will show you the target. So the target is 3060. I'm gonna leave it on for this test and I'm going 1600 on the RAM. This will not be a leaderboard run at all. Like, it might be on the top 100 somewhere, maybe, but realistically, overclocking the core right now and being power limited tells me that there's gonna be some fluctuation. We might even crash on this because this can probably go more like to 3030 like we saw in heaven once the temperatures start climbing. All right, 27,165. It's nowhere near good enough to get on the leaderboard. In fact, I'm number 100 right now. That's how much things have changed in the last couple weeks. And the spread difference between the top 10, like being in the top 10 and 100 is only 1,200 points. So that's a very narrow spread for 90 spots. In fact, number 10 and 11 are tied even at 29,582 or something like that. And as you can see, 3045 is where our target is, but with my frequency dropping all the way down to 2970, that's specifically because I cannot move this power slider because the only thing it can do to reduce power once we hit power limit, and we're already voltage limited, is to drop the clock.
and it's dropping the clock. So there's nothing I can do about that. And I don't know if there's any other VBIOS that would somehow work with this, because here's the thing, VBIOS between manufacturers are not like, they're not directly compatible. Some are, some aren't. I am not gonna risk breaking this card, although with the dual BIOS, fortunately, it's unless you really do something wrong, with a dual BIOS, you can usually recover a BIOS by booting to the proper BIOS, flipping the hardware switch back to the brick BIOS, and then flashing it. It will flash whatever BIOS is directly connected to the switch, which would be the bad one. I've not even flashed a 40 series card. I don't know if there's a new ND Flash utility necessary or not. But man, wouldn't it have been neat to see it on the leaderboard? Temps though, let's look at those temps during that run. Maxed out at 56 on air with the fans at 100%. All right, well, there you go, guys. Just the card that never was supposed to exist and still doesn't exist is sitting in a system in front of me that I really wish you guys would have the opportunity to mess around with, because I think EVGA on this round just made the better card in terms of the physical decisions. They were not insanely heavy. They were not insanely large. The plug is on the back, which based on the location of that plug versus the option of squishing it against your side panel made more sense. It would have more case compatibility. It doesn't sag. The aesthetics are not all over the place. They're just clean. But obviously there was a business decision there that just had to be made versus going forward with this card. Anyway, guys, there you go. Hope you guys enjoyed me showing you the card that never was, and we'll be making it into my collection. And given the fact that cards are just still having problems with the power connectors, as much as I would love to just take this home and put it in my system at home and run it personally for my own selfish pleasure, I don't want to risk hurting it because of the cable problems. I just have no faith in 4090s right now. In fact, my best friend and business partner who helps me run this channel has a 4090 that he's like leaving in the box right now because we just don't know why they're burning still, and we just cannot trust it. It's one of those times where in hindsight, it looks like EVGA made the right choice. Now we can just convince them to start making AMD cards.